Good evening, guys, and welcome to Armchair Conversations with Rob. Got a question for you. What's your story? What's your story? We all got stories. We all tell stories about others, about ourselves, and about our lives. I'm very much thinking about this one today. What's your story? Take a moment to think about it, and I'm going to ask you a series of things that go along with that question. What's your story? Is your story about all the things that have happened to you that give you the reasons to think that you can't do something? What's your story about the reasons why you won't do something? What do you think your stories have to do with whether you can or can't do anything? Okay, so let's play with it. We all have stories. We have bunches of stories, and they're all about all kinds of things. Why we're mad, why we're sad, why we're glad, why we can't, why we won't, why we shouldn't, why we didn't. Okay. Um, and I really am playing with this concept tonight because those are mostly the things that we use as our excuses to stop doing the things that might bring us to a level that we're uncomfortable with. Um, And they're also kind of like a drug. I mean, we tell our story over and over to anybody who will listen a lot of times, and we get high off of it. We get a sense of pleasure and satisfaction and a feeling of comfort from telling the reasons, the story about why such and such a thing happened, and that is the reason why we can't do this or we shouldn't do that, or this is why I'm mad at so and so, and blah 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 blah. And whether you realize it or not, we do get a sense of pleasure from that. Because if we can tell somebody our story and they believe us, then in some subconscious way maybe it feels like we let ourselves off the hook, or maybe even somebody else. So play with that idea. Why do you tell the story you tell? Do you tell the story you tell to get out of pain? Do you tell the story you tell to not take responsibility for your actions? I didn't do such and such because I knocked on the door and nobody answered, and so I didn't do this, that, or the other. I didn't go for the job interview because they didn't call me, or I didn't ask the person to help me because they were looking evil, or I didn't feel like which is a more truthful answer, deserved their help. And so we use these stories sometimes as for lack of a better word, cop out to not do the things that we ought to do, or maybe even that we want to do. And so one of the things you have to think about is being willing not to tell your story. Or to at least examine your story and question why you're telling it. Um, if you're telling your story about how, oh, I was born black, white, fat, broke, sick, stupid, whatever, and, because of that handicap, that wound that I lead with, see my wound? This is why. Forgive me, feel sorry for me, help me. This is my wound. Okay. When we lead like that, it gives us an excuse not to go for our greatness and to be something different. And listen, guys, I'm working on this one just like any of you are. So just because I'm talking to you about it doesn't mean I don't have things to work on, and I'm not working on it too. I'm just like you. Okay. But I do have enough awareness to say, that there are times when you have to question why you're telling your story. Is it in defense of your actions, as if you have to answer to anyone? Um, is it because you are afraid? And rather than mask the fear, just tell the truth. Scary. Don't know. Rather mask it. So that's, something to think about. So I'm asking you to start considering why you're telling your story. And especially if you are telling it to anybody who will listen, and using it as a wound or a crutch or a badge to put on yourself to excuse yourself from trying to do something different. I'm asking you to be willing to stop telling your story and start telling the truth. Again, you don't got to tell it to everybody, but you got to tell it to yourself. Because if you don't lead from the truth in your own mind and in your own self, how in the hell are you going to move forward? Why do you even bother to listen to people like me or people who are more established in the business of personal development if you're not willing to change, grow, lead differently, think differently, speak differently, act differently? So again, stories. The stories that you tell don't always have to be disempowering, though. But I think because it's more easy for us to tell the stories that give us a reason to hold back or to use our ego to prevent us or stifle us from doing something like forgiving someone or trying something new or changing the way we think or standing up for something that maybe we secretly believe in. Um, but we worry about what people are going to say, or if it fails, then somehow I got to have a reason why, that somehow I was doomed from the start, so people will not judge me harshly and I won't judge myself harshly. Balderdash. You need to tell the truth to yourself first, and then eventually try so very hard to get around to telling it to other people too. Because again, when you give yourself permission to glow and shine and grow and become something better, you give subconsciously and secretly and without real effort, you give other people the permission to do the same. So think about the stories you tell and why. And sometimes it's an uncomfortable situation and you have to dig deep. You have to ask yourself, why am I telling this story? Especially if it's one about why you can't do something or why you won't do something or your fear about doing something, which honestly, to admit to yourself you're afraid is a kind of a truth, isn't it? Admitting it to others is even better, but you have to start where you are. So give up your story and the truth starts to, as Iyanla Van Zant, I just started listening to her recently and I'm pretty impressed. I like a lot of the self-development people, but I was pretty impressed with the fact that what she says seems very effortless, as far as like if you eliminate some of the roadblocks to your moving forward, that some things just naturally begin to happen. And I do kind of believe that, but it's a new concept for me within the last 2-3 years. So ask yourself why you're telling your story. If it's not for and be honest with the answer. And if it's not for a reason that is pro whatever you're after, then stop telling the story. Okay. Um, Nobody wants to hear your sorry alibis. Um, Watching you act like a child who cries. Remember that poem by Mike Stone? If you happen to catch that clip, your alibis are just reasons why you're not moving forward. Your reasons about why you can't are valid in the sense that you can create exactly what you want. So if you give yourself all the reasons why you can't do something, surprise, surprise, when you can't. Okay, but if you tell stories that give reasons why you can, because I'm not a person that feels like you always have to attack and pound down your behaviors, okay, and just be, for lack of a better word, very masculine and aggressive and penetrating about changing your life. Sometimes the wet, the lunar, the contracting, the feminine is very powerful and just as useful depending on how you're going at it, because everything isn't a nail, and so you don't just carry around a hammer. Your box of tools has to be diverse. And so there are times when you're going to pound at yourself and pick at yourself and push yourself. But there are also times when you're going to be gentle with yourself and kind of let things evolve and happen naturally. Um, And so the same thing with your stories. Some stories may need to be deliberately attacked, and you have to force yourself to stop telling them because you've been telling them so long that even you believe them. Okay, but then there's also times when you have to start being willing to look at what the truth is and let that kind of replace the lie that you tell yourself for whatever reason. So just like you have to stop telling stories about why you can't, you have to, in my opinion, just tell stories about why you can. Tell the stories that are good about your life. Tell the stories that have given purpose and meaning and joy and happiness to your life. And so I'm going to give you a little homework assignment. The next time you're talking to somebody and you catch yourself saying something like, um, I'm just surviving, I'm just making it, um, immediately say something to counteract it, like, hey man, how you doing? Oh, I'm just making it, but I'm going to be doing a whole lot better. Now, that's not a perfect statement, but it's a step in the right direction. Because again, sometimes you have to use baby steps and you have to go in the right direction. And so immediately, if you catch yourself, and you're not always going to catch yourself because habits are long term ingrained things and they take time to get rid of, just like it took time to develop one. But I believe if you train it, you can untrain it. And if you untrain it, you can retrain it. Okay. So again, do it. Find a way to counteract what you're saying. If you find that you catch yourself saying something negative, or man, what's going on? Well, I'm doing as good as can be expected given my situation. Cut. Okay. Change it. Give it something else. Say something else. Say something better. Even if you have to say it right behind what you said. Like, but I can change my situation. It's up to me. Okay. Add that thing. And then eventually you may find that you catch yourself more often when you do say them. And as you say these counteracting statements, they may eventually, as time goes by, if you take some ease and relaxation about it and don't judge yourself harshly for doing what your habit patterns have caused you to do, they may eventually replace them. And your subconscious and your conscious eventually may start to believe it, and you become something different, or you start doing something different. Because as a matter of fact, I'll share something with you. It's kind of silly, but I've noticed it in the last couple of days. I Sometimes when I sleep, I put on like affirmations to play in the background, or something positive. And a lot of times I'll be watching something positive or watching some kind of self-development programming or something at night. And I use beat patterns to meditate to help my brainwave patterns to get into a different place, which we'll talk about that actually in one talk just for fun, because I think it would be very conducive to a lot of people to use, especially those who are beginning to learn to meditate. But anyway, I sometimes will leave that stuff playing in the background because 9 times out of 10 I'll fall asleep with. I don't really watch the TV. I use like YouTube or some streaming services with things on it that I want to hear, want to talk about, want to listen to, um, in the background. And I am pretty certain that something in the stream, because I just let it run. And so you know how YouTube is. You've got thing after thing after thing that kind of just plays down through the list, if you depend on how you use your YouTube. And I am certain that something in the background of the affirmations and things that I was listening to had something to do with making right choices about food, because anybody that actually knows me from where I live knows that I am an eater to the core of my being. I like to eat big. I eat huge portions at times. I definitely like bad food when it comes to things like, I'm the triple bacon cheeseburger person. Although the people who are vegetarians probably balk in horror at that, but that's another lesson for another day. Just because I'm a meat eater doesn't mean I can't teach you something about self-development. Don't look at the messenger, look at the message. Um, and so something in the repeated affirmations had something to do with, had to have had something to do with either making better choices about your food or not eating so damn much. Because I have found myself not finishing larger portions. I have found myself picking differently. Um, mm, I always liked good food as well as bad food, but it's been a lot easier for me to pick things that are um, a better step in the right direction. Like I find that I'm not having as much fun going after the or cooking at home the crappy double cheesy super salty bacony stuff. I still like it, but it's become more moderate, and I've noticed it even just in the last couple of days, which means that if I really wanted to bother, I could probably go back through and figure out what it was. But why? It's a good choice. So anyway, stories that you tell yourself and the stories that you should tell yourself that might be helpful. Um, but I want you to do that. I want that to be your homework. That's your takeaway for today. If you catch yourself saying something negative about your life, about yourself, or what you can and can't be, I want you to immediately do your best to state something that counteracts it that's positive. And I want you to do it as a regular part of your everyday routine. And give it 2 weeks and notice maybe the results if you get some kind of a shift in your ideas about yourself. Because you have been programmed to tell yourself a lot of things that aren't necessarily true, and that aren't necessarily possibility thinking. And it's not necessarily anybody's particular fault. It's an epidemic of the world that we live in, or at least I'll say here in this country, and in my case, this state. We tend to embrace the negative much easier, very cynical. We let people who are very much disbelievers in possibility um, influence us in ways that I feel like they shouldn't. So anyway, that also another time maybe we'll ramble about that. But I want to know, what's your story? Why are you holding on to it if it doesn't get you where you need to go? Why aren't you being honest about what you want, who you are, and what you need? So, got your homework, play with it for 2 weeks. Refer back to any of my videos, just messing around and enjoying myself, and give me comments. Let me know what you think, both the lovers and the haters, okay, and the likers too, okay. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and thank you for sharing my armchair. And I look forward to talking with you and sharing with you guys over time as we go through. Thanks.